Crystia!
What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the Fringe. I need to get into a little bit of municipal politics for a second because it really affects the outcome of what's going on in major Canadian cities near you. When I talk about the ruthless spending of what happens in Calgary, well, look no further than an example of what the federal government is currently doing in terms of spend, 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 and then tax onto the people to cover those losses or cover their frugal ways of living. Um, what we're finding here, what we're finding that's going out now, is that pre Justin Trudeau era, if you were to drop the ball in the way that any of these installed mayors across Canada have done so, then they would have lost their jobs. There would be no chance of them winning another election. The same thing would happen with our prime ministers when you look at scandals that go on, when you look at ruthless spending that has no justification as to why it's happening, when we see money going out in billions of dollars of contracts to the prime minister's friends to merely pad the pockets of those who want to be involved and fatten their bank accounts while also increasing the wealth of those in charge of the country. What we're seeing in cities now is more irresponsibility similar to that of our prime minister, and we're seeing it to become an ongoing trend. I think that what we're going to see here in the future, when we talk about 15-minute cities, when we talk about all the plans that are going into places, that this isn't going to get any better before it gets much worse. The system itself has their claws in deep. Now, I want to highlight what's happened in Calgary here with this article that comes out about Calgary's Greenline LRT extension. Now, this has been in the works since way back when Nahid Nenshi, or as I call him, Nenshit, was running the city of Calgary pre-pandemic. His plan was to extend Calgary's LRT line into the north. Now, what he had proposed was doing almost like a channel type experiment by going underneath the Bow River through Calgary and running a tunnel system through there on 50 kilometers roughly of extended rail line. Now, he had a price tag for that, and then he left the city in shambles to Jyoti Gondek, the woke installed failed mayor of Calgary, to deal with it herself. And while she's been going through ruthless spending of her own and carelessness and bad planning, look at the situation we're in now. We've talked about a broken water pipe that's been down since June that the city can't even afford to fix. And now we're seeing a price tag showing that the city's about to spend $850 million and get nothing for it. Now, this leaches into something bigger, and I want to go into this briefly while then showing what the problem is and why this is a big issue for major cities. So stick with me on this one, folks, because if you'll notice the habits here, if you live in a place like Toronto or anywhere in Ontario or where you've seen mayors or any kind of government, whether it be provincial, federal, or municipal, who behave like this, wake up and smell the roses because you're about to see more of it as there's no consequences for these folks. The flat out stupidest decision ever made at City Hall means useless spending, higher taxes, and no Greenline LRT. Again, Danielle Smith has shut down the Greenline LRT and said that she's prepared to help fund a fiscally responsible Greenline LRT, but the plan that Jyoti Gondek is putting forward is just too expensive and for no reason. It says here, no councillor or mayor who voted to spend $2.1 billion with nothing to show for it can possibly survive the election next October. And yet there's 9 councillors and Mayor Jyoti Gondek who did what they want to vote and shut down the Green Line work. The massive loss, which includes $850 million in new wind-up costs, is surely unique for a Canadian city. We usually look into the federal government for waste on that level. Even there, squandered loot buys something, a ship or two, maybe an excellent new postage stamp. Our council voted for empty construction yards, bleak demolition sites, and dormant land now owned by the city. I talked about this on Friday's stream, and the reason that this is important is because that land now, when you talk about 15-minute cities, ladies and gentlemen, well, that land is now owned by the city. Now, there is a big section of land in downtown Calgary that used to be an open marketplace just off the Bow River called Eau Claire Market. Now, Eau Claire Market was shut down for this Greenline LRT expansion, and I want to get into that because here's where it's important for 15-minute cities. Earlier this year, the city closed down Eau Claire Market and kicked out the businesses and evicted residents from 23 river-run townhouses directly north of the market. The only possible redemption for just jackboot measures is replacing what is killed with something better. There was a station and development plan for Eau Claire. Now that's dead too. So again, the city has their hands on prime real estate off the Bow River, which of course I'm willing to bet they're going to push it all down and talk about affordable housing, which we all know is jargon for 15-minute cities. But when you look at the ball getting dropped on this project, regardless of things, when you look at Jyoti Gondek's ruthless spending of millions of dollars on artwork for the city and woke policies, woke ideologies, and now this water main break, I had said for a long time, you're going to see some form of a tax increase in Calgary next year, and it's going to be astronomical. And people said, well, she raised taxes almost 8% last year. People flipped out on her. I don't think that's going to happen again. Well, buckle up, folks. Councillor Dan McLean, who, while I like Dan, I still think him and every councillor in Calgary City Council should be resigning, should be stepping down, because they've all dropped the ball when it comes to this water main issue, when it comes to the spending of the city. Pigs at a trough. This is what we're seeing. But Dan McLean came out and showed the reality of what we're going to see in terms of a tax increase. Now, keep in mind, last year, Jyoti Gondek came forward and told Calgarians, well, we're probably going to see about a 3% tax increase, and that turned out to be almost 8% when things were said and done. So when we get this current estimate, I'm curious where things are going to go for Calgary. After being scolded at council for posting about the proposed 6.4% tax hike, it turns out I was right. How much higher do you think the tax hike could be after the Greenline debacle? Of course, Rick Bell linking his article to here. Calgary City Hall's real property tax hike is for you. It's 6.4%. Now, again, this is an estimate. Keep in mind that every January, when this budget gets passed and when the city decides what they're going to do with taxes, they also appoint themselves with very hefty raises each and every year. In fact, I don't think I've seen a year in the last decade where city council and the mayors haven't very happily, I'll say, voted in themselves for a nice hefty raise and bonus each and every year. City property taxes and city property tax hikes, you're in for a shocker, 6.4%. Doesn't sound like a high temperature story earlier in the week. It didn't set the world on fire. What's up with that? While there was an angry bargee over the Green Line, there was also some other fun and games going on at the place often nicknamed the Cowtown Kremlin or City Hall. They're burying the numbers, said Councillor Sonia Sharp. The new way of budgeting is burying the numbers. Any smart person who reads the report can find an executive summary in one of the attachments. The numbers are there. So when the mayor says, oh, I'm happy everyone decided to go with the new way of budgeting, it's a new creative way to make sure the numbers seem lower than they are. That is until you get to the tax bill. The councillor says it talks about a 6.4 tax percent increase for Calgary residents. Where is that? The City Hall main report, looking. Attachment 1. Attachment 1 of the City Hall Remain report, not there. Attachment 2, looking. Attachment 3, page 1, looking. Page 2, there it is, 6.4 tax residential increase. Ouch. Councillor figures City Hall should have put 6.4 somewhere in big letters, like that's going to happen. Why didn't those who should know better talk about this 6.4% number? Because, Rick, they know no one reads past page 1. In fact, some press reports echoed the city's official line and swallowed the city's spin. Where was the 6.4% tax hike number in the stories about the upcoming budget? Meanwhile, in the City Hall documents, the higher-ups at the Cowtown Kremlin say clearly they want to spend beyond council's direction to maintain previously approved increases. They say it's the growth of population and inflation that caused spending to fall out of line. We're going to get into that. Again, I know this is a lot of jargon. I know it's a lot of data that I'm giving you here and a lot of word salad, but it's all going to make sense, folks. They always have a reason for spending to fall out the line. Boom bust, it doesn't matter. There's always a reason to spend more. The city bigwigs talk about the pressures of how this will affect citizen satisfaction. Dear city taxpayers, it's your fault. You really want the big tax hike. Then City Hall mucky mucks pull off this old trick that's been used so many times before. Depending on the year, they pick something of some things that we all agreed we need in dollars. Then they suggest if citizens don't give them the tax hike they want, these important things won't get the attention they need, and all hell will break loose. This move distracts people from pointing out areas where the city can cut. Surprise, surprise, City Hall big shots need more money. I talked about this when I wanted to run for mayor of Calgary before I dropped out of the race. In fact, Dan McLean talking to me about vote splitting and how that could be dangerous by entering that race when I was having difficulties getting my team together. But I digress. The big problem here is that we're talking about a city that's essentially wanting to pad their pockets. When you look at a city's budget, when you look at NGOs or non-government organizations, the funding that goes out to these offices and different places that money should be given, there is huge and tremendous amounts of city waste. There are services being paid for that aren't being used, that don't sustain to be paid what they're being given. The biggest thing right now that they're arguing is this water main break and this Greenline LRT. Now, I know if you don't live in Calgary, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but here's where it's going to make sense. Friend of the channel, W. Brett Wilson, tweeting out, "It's bullshit, Naheed Nenshi. That so-called Green Line is now 10 kilometers long. It was proposed to him to be more than 50 kilometers long, and the cost is way up. $6 billion versus $5 billion. The cost per kilometer was once at $100 million per kilometer. Now his special line is $600 million per kilometer." And Jyoti Gondek is okay with this, along with her NDP members of council. Sonia Sharp, please press for the logical solution to Naheed Nenshi's stupidity. You've got Naheed Nenshi tweeting out, of course, since, again, he's running to be premier of Alberta. This is a guy who has sunk Calgary into its hardships with this Greenline LRT and his ridiculous planning structures. Not to mention the water main break, in which he ignored inspection reports on those pipes. But here he puts, there's an awful lot of misinformation. I love how they always use that word. There's an awful lot of misinformation being spread about the Green Line, so let me lay things out clearly. I know a few critics of this project who could use a refresher. Basically, he's saying, I know people don't like what I had to say and know that it's all bullshit, but I'm going to lay it all out to you with my lies, just so that you can be told by me that it's fact. It's a 5-minute video. I'm not going to waste your time with it, because he says we all need a refresher. Alberta Plumber tweeting out, "Here's a refresher for you." Now, W. Brett Wilson tweeted out a while ago, "The Green Line is a pathetic waste of time and money. Our money, not the mayor's money. Look at what Naheed Nenshi did." Never should he be a politician, nor should Jyoti Gondek, who loves him, and his stupid project. So let's break down the Greenline LRT. Every year, the Greenline project managed to get worse and worse. In 2015, the cost was $4.5 billion for 46 kilometers and 140,000 riders. So in 2015, again, this was proposed. This is when Nenshit was mayor, and it was put out there, we're going to do this. 2017, the cost was $4.6 billion, so it went up by 0.1, but it went from 46 kilometers down to 20, and was only going to accommodate 65,000 riders. 2 years later, in 2019, the cost was up to $4.9 billion, so 0.3 difference, and it was still 20 kilometers and 65,000 riders. So all they did was increase the cost of building the line. However, in 2020, the cost went up to $5.5 billion. So it went up $500 million more for 20 kilometers, but now for only 55,000 riders. Finally, in 2024, the cost was $6.2 billion for 11 kilometers and 32,000 riders. So in 9 years, we went from 46 kilometers and 140,000 riders to almost $2 billion more for 11 kilometers and 32,000 riders. This is where, again, it all boils down to what you're seeing in Toronto, with installed mayors like Olivia Chow saying, we're going to rename Dundas Street even though we don't have the money for it. We're going to do all of these projects even though we don't have the money for it. We're going to bring all these refugees in who are going to flood our streets and raise crime in our cities, but at least we drive nice cars. This is where the stupidity of mayors and their municipalities starts to wear thin. Jyoti Gondek has raised the price on this track to unfathomable heights and shortened the line and the capacity of riders it can take, to the point that the province has had to cut them off like a teenager with daddy's credit card that's hit their limit. She's being told no more spending. Now, I haven't even gone into showing, because of the length of this video, Jyoti Gondek's pity tweets saying the province is just bashing us around. They don't care. They don't care about us getting better deals. It's all Danielle Smith. It's all the province that's doing this. Rather than taking ownership to say, hey, everybody, I'm a stupid idiot who can't even manage water in my city. I spend, and now there's no money left for a train line that's essentially out of control. Again, Danielle Smith has said She's certainly not terminating the Green Line. She does agree that Calgarians could use an effective extension of the LRT system in Calgary. However, it has to be financially sound, it has to make sense, and it can't be sitting there solely to pad the pockets of Jody Gondek and her friends, who she gives contracts out to simply, to laugh in taxpayers' faces. What I'm showing here is the problem that you're going to start seeing in major cities across the country, and that's corruption when it comes to taxation and spending. When we look at the federal government, when we look at Justin Trudeau's radical spending, when we look at everything he's done with every scandal, whether it's the Aga Khan, whether it's his winter vacations to Jamaica, whether it's gifts that he takes from people, or the cost for him feeding everybody on a jetliner flight, Justin Trudeau has waved his scandals in Canadians' faces and said, nothing's going to happen to me. I have parliamentary privilege. I am exempt from the law. At least that's how he wants to behave. Some provincial leaders were doing the same thing throughout the pandemic and even after the pandemic. Now you've got it down to municipalities who are saying, hey, we want a piece of that pie too. We're going to jump on board and support people like Justin Trudeau. We're going to get under the umbrella of the World Economic Forum, and we're essentially going to spend, and the taxpayers can continue to work. They can have multiple jobs. They can pay until they're dead and broke at the knees. And we're just going to keep piling it on top, and nobody's going to vote us out. Nobody's going to fix our system. And it's for those reasons I've said all council members should be resigning at this point. They should all be stepping down. They're all pigs at a trough. The provincial government are all pigs at a trough. The federal government are the biggest pigs at a trough. But what's more important, folks, is let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. Do you see this in other cities? Do you see this kind of behavior coming forward? And do you think we're going to see this kind of behavior continue as time moves on, especially after people like Pierre Poilievre form government in the country of Canada? Let me know what you guys think down below. Again, if it's your first time here, I hope this very lengthy video has earned your subscription. Make sure as you're hitting that button, you click the bell for notifications. Join me live here on the channel each and every Friday night for Friday Night Fringe, our live streaming show where we go over everything that's happened this week in politics, everything coming up in the week ahead, and a little bit of back and forth within our community. It's always great to chat with you guys outside of making these videos, and I'm also joined by the beautiful Mrs. Fringe every Friday to hear what you guys have to say as well. She looks forward to speaking with each and every one of you every Friday. Also here starting at 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central on the channel. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and have a great rest of your day. I'll catch you on the next one.